Good day, everybody. Recording in progress, got that. welcome to everybody. It's great to see all these wonderful people online as well. I've put it into gallery mode so that we can all see who's on the screen here. My name is Alain Barker, as you all know. I am past president of the wonderful, amazing Bloomington Rotary Club. Bloomington is a place where people are bold and they get out in 7 degrees weather and come to the Rotary meeting. And the equally bold are those people who are sitting in the warmth of their home, taking care of themselves. So welcome to everybody. I'm very honored to be leading today's meeting. Our president, Ron Barnes, thought the better of it and took himself to Florida for 2 weeks. And no, he's at a conference and very appropriately down there. And his thought for the day, our thought for the day is you must learn from the mistakes of others. You can't possibly live long enough to make them all yourself. How about that? Eleanor Roosevelt said that. Okay, well, we'll move right into our reflection. I'm going to invite past President Mike Baker. Mike's at the back there and he's running towards me right now because he's going to both do the reflection and introduce any of our guests. So just wait for him to do that. Mike, you're here. Okay.
What am I doing?
Your reflection.
Oh, reflection. Okay. Good afternoon. We'll revert back to the old days when reflections were short. I was thinking about this because of all the news and everything going on in the world. The average age of a flight deck crew on a carrier is 19 years old. The average age of a pilot is 40. The youngest captain in the Navy is 25, which is pretty amazing. Our national leaders who have decided, and they're because we've elected them, they make decisions every day of what to do with our military. And most of the people in the military serve because they've been asked. They don't necessarily have any strong political aspirations or goals or thoughts. I didn't when I was 19 or 20. But our decision makers think it's in our best interest many times to do things and utilize these young people all over the world, the men and women all over the world that serve our country. So today I reflect and ask you all just to think and keep in your thoughts the men and women who are in conflict and hope you will keep them in your thoughts.
And Mike, in that vein, thank you so much for your service. Thank you. So Mike is going to come back again, second round, and he's going to introduce our guests. Do we need a moment for that? Are you good? Yeah.
We need a moment, but I'm going to need some help with some of these guests, I think. There's a guest of Yolanda Torino, Jen Berry. Please stand. Is it Yun Wan? Am I close? Rotaract. Let's see, please stand so you can be recognized. Okay, then we have, is it? Yaya Cater?
Yeah.
Also Rotaract? Yes. And then I believe a Tiffany Nichols, guest of Liz Irwin. Okay, thank you. If you want to know more about Rotary, there's somebody at your table that can help you understand, maybe be a member of our club, but thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Mike. And Joy, do we have anybody online?
We have plenty of Rotarians online, and our very special guest online today is Natalie.
Oh, yes. And Natalie, you were showing us your dog.
Yeah, show us your dogs, Natalie. Show us a dog.
Is your dog there? Let's pin her for a second. Oh. Natalie, what is the dog's name?
This is Molly.
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 You can hear me. Her
Okay.
name is Molly.
Amazing, Molly. Well, welcome, Molly. Welcome, Molly.
Very sweet.
Great. Fantastic. Okay, so we have a few birthdays to celebrate this week. John Bender, January 19th. Mary Getzi, January 20th. And Eric Powell, January 17th. Happy birthday to them all. And we have one anniversary for a very special person here, who was our district governor last year, Lance Eberly, has been part of the Rotary Club for 22 years. Congratulations, Lance. And thank you, Lance, for everything that you did last year to accelerate and enhance this amazing district. Thank you very much. Okay, I think there is time for happy dollars. If anybody wants to, maybe we could start with somebody online while Tracy gets her camera and things going. Anybody online who'd like to share a happy dollar? Or 2, or 5, or 20? Jeff, I'm looking at you.
And it's 50.
Bill Perkins has his hand up.
Bill, go ahead.
Hi there. I'd like to throw in 20 happy dollars. We spent the weekend in very, very cold Boulder, Colorado, where our grandson and his bride got married. Very nice ceremony. We managed to overcome the cold, but it was very nice. So $20, please.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, we'll keep online for a second. I think that Jeff's ready to say something.
Yeah, I'd like to give 25 happy dollars to all the newly elected officials and wish them the best in this year and proceeding. And it looks like a great group of people, and I'm wishing all the best for them and for Bloomington.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. That's wonderful. Okay, let's move to the room here.
Hello, my name is Sandy. I'd like to give $23 in behalf of the amazing day we had with all the volunteers celebrating Martin Luther King yesterday, with very interesting people getting up talking about what it was like when they were around, when Martin Luther King was around. And we just had some incredible, amazing comments from people in life circumstances. So there you go.
Thank you, Sandy. You're Lynn Schwartzberg here. Liz Irwin.
Hi, Liz Irwin here. I just wanted to take a moment to say how grateful I am for our Duke Energy line workers, some of whom were working all night to keep the power on. We had an outage that many of you may know about, but they were out battling the cold to keep the lights on for all of us. So here's to Duke Energy.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Yeah.
I have a few happy dollars, no particular reason, but grateful for good friends and good health.
Great. Excellent. Good.
Any others? Anyone else online? All right.
Sally has a lovely cat.
I'm grateful for everybody who makes it possible for us to stay home with our friendly cats. You know, a few years ago, we weren't able to do Zoom, and now everything is hybrid, and it's really great. So thank you.
It's great. And it feels more and more seamless thanks to Tyler and all his amazing work. So thank you very much, Tyler. Good. Okay. So what are we doing next? We've got announcements, we've got happy dollars, and now we're going to move to the program. We have a very special guest with us, and Amy Osajiwa is going to come up and introduce our guest.
Okay, Abby Gitlitz is our guest today. She is the founder and executive director of the Bloomington Creative Glass Center, which now has a home on Grimes Lane, just north of Switchyard Park. Abby's eclectic adventures have taken her from her childhood home in Bloomington across the world and across many occupations. Her first job was as a pastry chef at Tina's in Bloomington, and she was head chef and restaurant manager. In Boston, she was a head chef and restaurant manager for many years. She worked on an ambulance as an EMT in college and as a tour guide and a Turkish carpet salesman for 2 years in central Turkey. She speaks Spanish and Turkish and a little German and has been on national TV in Greece, Turkey, Guatemala, and the US. She was also one of the 1 million residents displaced by Hurricane Katrina. As you may have gathered by now, Abby loves to travel. She has been to over 40 countries and 5 continents. And if you like bird watching, I encourage you to ask her about visiting her Airbnb in the foothills of the mountains outside of Oaxaca, Mexico, where you can find her during part of the year when she is not in Bloomington sharing her glass art, building houses for Habitat for Humanity, and supporting other great causes. And now you are well positioned to emerge victorious if you challenge her at 2 truths and a lie. Thank you for being here, Abby.
We're going to start with a mic check. So I'm just going to stand here and say meaningless things. Do we feel that our levels are good at this time? Can people in the back hear me? Can people at home hear me? Wait, there's the camera. It will automatically swivel to me. Yeah, wonderful. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I recognize many faces in this room. Some of you have known me since I was an infant. Some of you have known me less time than that. But I'm delighted. Some of you have known my family for a long time. So I'm delighted to be here and thank you for inviting me. So I'm the executive director of the Bloomington Creative Glass Center. And before I start, we're going to do some audience participation stuff so that I don't feel like I'm, talking to a room of nobody. So how many of you here had, before you got the notice of what this week's Rotary was going to be about, how many of you had heard of the Bloomington Creative Glass Center? Oh, a lot of you. Fabulous. How many of you have been to the Bloomington Creative Glass Center? A few of you. How many of you have taken a class at the Bloomington Creative Glass Center? Getting a little narrower there. How many of you have volunteered with the Bloomington Creative Glass Center? And now I'm going to turn it over to Lynn and she'll be doing the rest of the presentation. How many of you, some of you have taken a class with us. We have students as young as 5 and our oldest student is 98. So we believe that art should be in the hands of absolutely everybody. How many of you knew that we were a not-for-profit? Some folks. How many of you know how we got started? A couple people. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the Bloomington Creative Glass Center got started. And to do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own journey through glass and how I got to where I am now. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Glass Center. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what makes glass so much more interesting than anything else. All right? I am not biased. All right, and I have a clicker. All right, let's see if I can figure this out. I'm a smart woman. All right, like there are only 5 buttons to choose from. All right, so here's another question for you all. How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you grew up when you were a little kid? Whether you did it or not, how many of you knew as a kid what it was that you wanted to do? Some folks. I knew exactly what I'd wanted to do when I was a little kid. I wanted to be a professor. Everybody in my life was a professor, right? I thought it was a great job. You get summers off, you get paid sabbaticals, and you get to go travel, right? I was like, that's brilliant. I wanted to be a professor. And I was pretty sure I wanted to be a professor in archaeology, or maybe marine biology, or maybe marine archaeology, right? And I tried those things. And here's what I discovered. I'm not very good at school. I come from a long line of academics, and that line ended pretty hard with me, right? I am not an academic person. So becoming a professor, that was not going to be my path. What I loved doing was doing things with my hands. And the family story goes that I taught myself to knit when I was 5. This is not true. I was about 13, but my first project was a cable knit sweater because I've never been good at being like, I will learn a skill and I will do the basics for a long time till I move on. For example, in 1994, there was an exhibit at the IU Art Museum put on by Henry Glassy of Turkish handicrafts. Some of you may have been around and gone to that. And he brought in Turkish artists, and one of them was a woman, a Turkish village woman, who sat and wove carpets for the first week of the exhibit, right? Living demonstrations. And I watched her, and then I went home, built a loom, and wove a carpet because that made sense to me, right? I've always been someone who can see how things are done and just intuit how to do the next step. So I thought, all right, I'm gonna be an artist, right? So I went to school, I went to Oberlin, and I took my first studio art class. I was very excited about it. The professor had just been denied tenure and his wife had just left him. And he failed all of us, and he made the whole learning experience about as unpleasant as it could possibly be for all of us. And I thought, I don't think studio art is for me, right? If this is what it means to be an artist, I don't like this. So I thought, well, art's just going to be a hobby for me. And I got out of school and I had exactly one useful skill, because I have a degree in religious studies. So I'm looking back there at Forrest Gilmer. There are lots of things you can do with a degree in religion, but what I knew how to do was cook. That was one skill I had gotten out of my very expensive 4 years of college. I moved back home and I got a degree, or I got a job at Tina's. Any of you guys remember Tina's? Yeah, I was their pastry chef in the 90s. So if you ever ate any of their really fabulous desserts, that was me behind the scenes cooking it for you. And I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought, this is fabulous. I want to be a cook. But I don't want to be in the Midwest anymore because I've been here for a long time. So I moved to Boston, became a cook out there, opened some restaurants, thought, this is great. Maybe this is what I want to do. Now I want to rewind just a little bit because something else happened in between. I always did art. I always piddled around with stuff. I knit, I wove. You ask anybody who went to college with me, they'll say, weren't you the woman who sat in front of me and was making a chess set out of Fimo dough, doing stained glass, brought a drop spindle into class and would spin wool during lessons? They asked me to stop doing that. Right? I always like to do stuff with my hands. So the day before I graduated, oh wait, I have pictures. I've remembered this. I put together a slideshow. This is me. I was a very cute person. I liked to do things with my hands. This is shortly before I almost got stepped on by an elephant, which is another story, but you can ask me about it, another two truths and a lie. I was always very creative and outgoing. Yes, my sister and I made those costumes ourselves. And I like to cook from an early age. The one on the right actually is me in a documentary, oddly enough, that is going to be airing on PBS sometime this year. So about the Jewish Inquisition, or the Inquisition against the Jews and the foods that those Jews ate. So there, I'm making some. All right. So the day before I graduated college from my expensive college with a degree in religious studies, which was not terribly useful, I went to Cedar Point Amusement Park in Sandusky, Ohio, to go ride the roller coasters with me and the other people who were graduating. And there at Cedar Point Amusement Park is a glass blowing pavilion from the Toledo Art Museum. And I saw that glass blowing, and it was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. Also the hottest, but the coolest thing I had ever seen. Because here was the thing, right? They have this molten glass and they're touching it with what looked like wadded up newspaper and squishing it into shapes, right? Now, think about your own experience with glass. When you were a kid, and if glass broke, what was the first thing the adult in the room told you? Don't touch it. Why? It's sharp and you can cut yourself, right? When you got to elementary school and you did art, think about the arts that you did in art class. You painted. You probably did something with clay. At some point, there was construction paper in your life. When you were in elementary school, was there ever a time where your art teacher said, here is broken glass, do something with it? Right? No. And certainly none of us ever said, here is molten glass, do something with it. So glass is, as an art, something we don't get to experience, right? We're told from an early age, glass is dangerous, step away. So here I was watching these people, and I swear, it looked like they were shaping the glass with wadded up newspaper in their hands, just squishing this molten glass. And I thought, that is the coolest thing I have ever seen. I want to do that. Now, I was able to watch a woman weaving for about 4 hours, go home, build a loom, and weave a Turkish carpet. Also, as it turns out, get employed to weave carpets in Turkey and be a tour guide in Turkey. And it's all Henry Glassey's fault. But I had no idea how they were doing glass. None of it made sense to me. None of it was intuitive. And there was nowhere to do it around here. Right? So I spent the next 2 years trying to find somebody who would teach me how to blow glass. And when I moved to Boston, which is where I ended up, I lucked out. After a year, I discovered that my roommate's brother blew glass at MIT in Boston. He is not in this picture. I am. And this is me ladling molten glass into the cavity of a Cornish game hen. Right. So glass in the 90s is different than it is now, which is nice. I started in the 90s. In the 90s and prior to that, glass blowing was a male-centered sport. It was all about showing how tough you were, showing how much ego you had, and almost every glass blowing studio, which is called a hot shop, is just a sea of toxic masculinity. The ones I had managed to get into and see if they would teach me, I'd been hit up or hit on, I'd been harassed, and once I'd been groped, right? And nobody had actually allowed me to try glass blowing. It was a place that women were not welcome. Until I got to MIT. And MIT, the glass blowing studio there is part of the material sciences department. It is a non-credit program, and it is not part of an art school. So it's there for people who are going to be working with glass in their lives. So doing fiber optics, coming up with the coding on the space shuttle tiles, right? People who are not actually the greatest artists, but are really excited about almost any crazy thing you can come up with to do with glass, which is when we're like, hey, let's ladle glass inside of Cornish game hens, which was really cool. We also made a cast of the Cornish game hen and then blew into that, so we had the inside and the outside of the Cornish game hen. I know, it was really neat. We blow into pumpkins. We make crazy contraptions and blow in them. We were in the bottom of the basement of the main building underneath the dome, just all kind of squirreled away there. I will say I didn't go to MIT, and the MIT program was only for MIT students and faculty. But for those of you who know me, I'm a very persuasive person. And I talked my way in and simply never left. The thing was, this was what I loved to do the most, but there was no job in it for me. There was no way for me to make a living out of doing this. I was still cooking as my regular job and blowing glass and helping to teach glass blowing as time went on. But I couldn't make a living at it. In 2002, I decided to quit all of my other jobs and become a full-time artist, being a production artist. And I did a little bit of this. I mainly did stained glass. And what I discovered was I hated it. Right? I do not like making the same thing over and over again. I do not like going to art fairs. I do not like putting my stuff in galleries. That was not me at all. So, okay, studio production artist is out. We're going to see what the next picture is because I have no idea. Then I got hired to be part of a team that was doing a big installation, public art piece for the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which is, and I'm standing very close to this camera, sorry for anybody at home. That's like the state version of a CSI. And I was hired to fabricate these stained glass panels. This is a twice life-size human body laying on its back, and then these are cross sections of the body, so that when you look down the whole thing, you see the whole body, or you can look at these individual cross sections. And what's cool about this, the data we had, how do you get good cross sections? This was 2003, so this is prior to a lot of imaging. The answer is you have somebody donate their body to science, then deep freeze it, and then slice it on a meat slicer. I didn't do this part. Slice it on a meat slicer and take pictures of each slice as it happens so that you get this 3D imaging through the body. Again, prior to the kind of 3D imaging we can do now. So I used this and I made this fabulous piece. And I worked with a team called Helmick and Schechter. They're the ones who had the big idea. And they knew they wanted to do glass. I was the one who was like, here's what it's going to look like. They had a different idea. I told them their idea was stupid. And then they said, well, make a prototype. I made it. They're like, you're hired, do the thing. But they figured out the logistics of all of this. And what I learned really quickly was doing the logistics of public art is a nightmare. Working with the groups who have it, figuring out how to hire scissor lifts wherever you're going to go, figuring out what the weight support of the second-story balcony that you're adhering things to is going. It's a nightmare. You would need a master's degree in engineering, which one of these guys had, right? So I was like, okay, so public art is not for me. I was running out of art things. It was that's when I went to Turkey and became a Turkish carpet salesperson for a while. Actually, what then happened is I got offered a job in New Orleans to run a glass blowing studio down there. And it was awesome, and I loved it until Hurricane Katrina happened. And molten glass and rising seawaters do not mix, or they do, but not well. And so suddenly I was one of the million people who were unhoused. But unlike an unhoused person in Bloomington, I had also lost my community, my job, my home, all of my things. I was lucky when it happened. I was actually not in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit. And this is directly across the street from my house. I was not there when it hit. I was up in northern Maine at a glass blowing camp with one of the best glass blowers in the country that I had managed to talk my way into his class. And I was not at all at the same level of the other glass blowers. And when Hurricane Katrina happened, I hadn't evacuated. All I had was my 5 pairs of glass blowing shirts, 2 pairs of really grubby shorts, a pair of sneakers. Because what do you take to glass blowing camp? That's what you take to glass blowing camp. I believe I also had a tutu and a tiara because you also take that to glass blowing camp, right? But I didn't have anything. And I was lucky. The guy I was taking the class from felt really bad for me, and he took me home with him and gave me a job and let me live with him. He didn't tell his wife any of this until I showed up on his doorstep. So that was awkward. But yeah. And so I got to move to north of Seattle and work with some of the best glass blowers in the country who all felt really, really sorry for me because I was a refugee. So they all wanted to give me jobs. But where I was living, it was a great place. I enjoyed working there. But my landlord told me, hey, we love having you. But just so you know, on June 1st, your rent is going to go from $625 a month to $125 a day, because they had a summer rental and that's what I was living in. So I was like, well, I guess I'll move again. So I applied to grad school and thought, all right, I'm going to get a master's degree in glass, which is slightly more useful than an undergraduate degree in religious studies. So I went to grad school, and here I am doing grad school stuff. We had a mobile glass blowing unit that we take to fairs. It was super fun. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved the teaching. I've always loved teaching. Teaching is my passion. I love that part of it. I won the award for best graduate instructor in the university, Southern Illinois University, Carbondale one year. I loved it, but I didn't love the world of academia. I didn't love this idea of publish or perish. I didn't love the cutthroatness. If you're in the arts, you're looking at a whole bunch of visiting professorships for years in like Abilene, Texas, and places that I did not wish to be. And I was significantly older than any of my fellow grad students. I'm like, great, you guys are 24. You go bounce around. I'm 36. I want to move home. I want to move to Bloomington. I love Bloomington. Bloomington is the best place to be. So I moved back home and I figured, well, I'll just start something, right? Bloomington had no glass at the time. Here I am in my studio working on a variety of things. All right. So I moved back home, and in my possession, I had a whole bunch of blown glass pumpkins. How many of you guys know about the Great Glass Pumpkin Patch? Okay, a lot of folks. How many of you didn't know that the Glass Center was the ones who did that? Anybody didn't know there was a connection between those two? Good, we're getting the word out. So I did not invent the Great Glass Pumpkin Patch. The Great Glass Pumpkin Patch was invented in 1999 at the Bay Area Glass Institute. And if I went backwards, let's go backwards to this guy. This guy is the head of the MIT glass program, a guy named Peter Hauk, who was one of my main mentors. He was also on the board of directors for the Bay Area Glass Institute. He brought this to MIT, and MIT had their first pumpkin patch in 2000 when I was still blowing there. They still have their pumpkin patches. They're going to have their 25th this year. I brought it to Carbondale. And in 2006, Carbondale had their first Great Glass Pumpkin Patch. I also think that's why they let me into school, because I managed to raise enough money for the program for all of our visiting artists by the Great Glass Pumpkin Patch. And they're now on their, whatever theirs is, 18th. So I knew it was a model that worked. So I brought it to Bloomington, and I made a whole bunch of pumpkins in Carbondale while I still had access to a glass blowing studio. And in 2010, we had our first Great Glass Pumpkin Patch here in Bloomington. We had 198 pumpkins. All of them were made by me, and I kept all the money. It was a good deal, right? I didn't have an organization, and I had rent to pay. And everybody who was involved in it was either related to me or soon to be related to me, right? Somebody there was my next door neighbor and is now my stepdaughter. It was a small thing, but it was testing the waters. And at that event, a major thing happened. And that was Thomas Gregg, who is here at IU, bought a pumpkin and then came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm interested in this glass blowing thing. Can you teach me how?" I can. Now, there's nowhere to blow glass in Bloomington. The closest place to blow glass was up in Indianapolis. I wonder if I have a picture of it. Let's see. No, we'll now talk about the Bloomington Creative Glass Center. So the Bloomington Creative Glass Center was born out of this conversation between me and Thomas Gregg. And I thought, ooh, he can help me make pumpkins. Honest to God, that's what I thought. Not I can teach him how to make stuff, but he can help me make more pumpkins, and we'll see what happens. And he and I started driving up to Indianapolis, which was the closest studio that we could rent. And he and I became really close. We started inviting other people up with us. And the deal was, we would teach you how to blow glass for free if you would help us make pumpkins for the Great Glass Pumpkin Patch, which paid for the rental time. Okay? And we would take anybody at all. We figured if you're interested and willing to drive up to Indianapolis to do this, we would take you along for the ride. So it started out just me and Thomas. And then a couple more people came, and then a couple more people came. And soon we had about 20 people, all of whom who wanted to do this. So we would go up every other week. We would carpool up. We'd meet at my house, 4 people to a car, drive up there, 2 cars was worth of people. You guys have all been on long road trips, right? Everybody been on a long road trip? Everybody drive up to Indianapolis when they were doing all the construction on 37? That made it a longer road trip. Yeah. Twice a month for 8 years. Yeah, me. And every time it was a different group of people in the car. Could have been Amy, could have been Lynn, could have been Alan, right? Could have been Martha, could have been any of y'all, right? I'd take you up there. And on the way, we'd get to know each other really well, because there's only so much you can talk about glass, right? And on the way home, we'd get to know each other really well. Because when you're working with molten glass, it's 2,000 degrees, and we'd blow glass for 4 hours. So that's a lot of sweating. And then we'd all get in the car together and sit real close together, right? We got to know each other in a way that you do that's different than just a regular road trip, right? And we became family. And that's one of the biggest things about the Bloomington Creative Glass Center is we started with community and then did art, right? A lot of organizations start with the idea of what they're going to do. We started with this idea of we are a community. And then we said, hey, all of you in the car, what do you want this to be? What do you want to do with this? All right. There I am. Hey, look at me. So there were three things that made the Bloomington Creative Glass Center happen. The first was that a bunch of us had to drive up to Indianapolis over and over again. So we got to know each other and trust each other and work together and want to be a part of things. The second thing that happened was partnering with IU, with a group of Kelly students. And we got together, and they were the ones who, it was part of a class project they had to do. And they were the ones who said, hey, you only offer one thing. Businesses that only offer one thing are not successful. You need to offer another thing. And we said, okay. They said, you need to offer something that you can do here in Bloomington. And we said, great. All of our stuff is up in Indianapolis. So, and they said, and you need to have kids and grown-ups and old people. Like, we have no idea what this is. So the second thing that happened was Ann Brom got involved with us, and she's currently our director of education, and she's a glass fuser. That means taking pieces of flat glass, putting them on top of each other, and then putting them in a kiln to heat them up. She said, hey, we could do a fusing project. Let's see if we can get people in, we'll do a fusing project. We did, our first one was 2016, our glass extravaganza, and we had 150 people come and make fused glass sun catchers. And we thought, this is good, people will do this. Aged 5 to, I think that one was in our late 70s, right? Suddenly we had this other thing we could do. So that was the second thing that happened, was we partnered with IU, and they helped us expand what we were gonna do. The third thing that happened was COVID. Anybody remember COVID? Good times. So when COVID happened, the way glass blowing works is you have long metal pipes, and then you blow with your mouth into the metal pipe. By the time the air hits the glass is 2,000 degrees, that kills everything down there. But where you put your mouth is not 2,000 degrees. And prior to COVID, I had never in my life seen a glass blowing pipe cleaned, ever. And I had been blowing glass at that point for 24 years, never once. And we all have really robust immune systems because of it. That's what I always say. But so we couldn't think of a way to invite the public in and say, come, we know there's a pandemic, but it will be fine if we all put our mouths on these same pipes. And we also couldn't figure out a way to disinfect them in between in a fast enough way. So we shut down. And we still made pumpkins. Me and one other person made all 468 pumpkins for that year's Great Glass Pumpkin Patch until I blew out my wrist, right? But we couldn't do anything with the molten glass. So we had to completely retool our programming. And at this point, I'm still the only employee. We had to rethink what we're doing. And all of a sudden we came up with take-home stuff. You take it. Okay, right, that means we can be mobile. We can take stuff on the road. The other thing that happened with COVID is my dad died. And the reason this is important is my dad lived in Mexico, the aforementioned beautiful house in Mexico that is now an Airbnb. And when he got sick with COVID, we knew that there was a slim chance he would survive. So he told us on December 22nd that he had been diagnosed with COVID at 10 o'clock at night. On December 23rd, my sister and I bought plane tickets to Oaxaca, Mexico. And on December 24th, I flew to Mexico and told our 3 strongest volunteers, hey, do you guys want a job? And all of a sudden we went from having 1 employee, me, to having 4 employees with no training, and I'd left the country. And the 3 of them, by God, they stepped up. And think about the various work experiences you've had in your life and the bosses that have been really good. What do they have in common? When you think of a boss in your life that has been a really good boss, what are some of the attributes of them? Yeah. They trust your judgment. What else? Other things that you have seen from bosses that have been really good in your lives. They're always there when you need them. All right, so they trust your judgment. They're always there when you need them. What else? As you think of really good bosses, I hope that everybody here has had a good boss and can think of things. Judy. They're strong communicators. Yeah, what else? Empowerment, right? They empower their employees. Yeah. They're good at team building, bringing people together. They give you the tools that you need to be successful. And I'm sorry, I missed the one online. Say it again. Huh? They care about you as a person. So we went from having no employees to me being the boss of 3 people, and I'd left the country, right? So we had to figure out how to make this work. And by God, I trusted those people. And I gave them autonomy to do their things. I called them every day. I talked them through lighting the glass blowing furnace while I was in a bean field in way out in the boonies, right? But I trusted them to do their thing, and I gave them the tools they needed to do the job. And when I came back, I discovered that they had transformed the Bloomington Creative Glass Center into a fabulous thing in which they had ownership, they wanted to do it, they were engaged, and they wanted to see it succeed. So I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to do, okay. So what makes the Glass Center different than other arts organizations? The first is our community. We started out as a group of people that blew glass together. We ate together, we worked together, we trusted each other. Glass blowing is a team sport. That means you are working together with somebody else, with something that is very dangerous, so you have to trust each other. We have amazing teachers at the Glass Center, and we do not have a lot of ego involved with our teachers. They want you to do interesting things, and they're excited for what you are going to make. We have a culture of sharing ideas and celebrating mistakes, which makes it a safe place to learn. Everybody is bad at glass blowing when they start. We always say, you're going to make something really ugly on your first time. Really? No, it's going to be bad. But we're really excited for you for that, right? We know it takes a while to learn this stuff. And we have a mentorship program. So new students get partnered with people who are a little more advanced, who can say, oh, I was there. You'll get better, right? Do all of our students get better? No. But we still partner them with mentors who say that they will. We create space of innovation through our Fusing Circle and Open Studios. We actively work to bring in marginalized groups and non-arts groups to work together to foster new ideas. Our staff and volunteers genuinely care about each other and our students. We check in on our students and staff we haven't seen in a while. We create shared space of joy and anger and grief and need. We have been there as people's kids have died, as people have gotten married, as people have given birth. We have a leadership style that involves letting people explore and make the place their own. And we have a culture of yes, and you come to me with an idea, you want to teach a class? Great, do it. What can I give you to make that happen, right? It failed spectacularly? Fine, let's figure out why the things in the kiln blew up, right? That happens. And we really like to throw a good party. So since 2010, we've grown from an organization with 1 glass blower, 11 volunteers, no students and no staff, to a nonprofit with 15 staff, 150 volunteers, and over 4,000 students in 2023. And then we have our amazing staff, and they are quite something. And I'm going to do real quick, because I know I'm out of time. So some of the things we do glass blowing, fusing, casting, sand casting. This is ladling your molten glass into things. Painting on glass. We do a summer camp. We have 48 campers come and hang out with us for 2 weeks during the summer. It is awesome. We blow things up. We do school programs. So we're in the elementary schools doing programming, STEM programming with students. Here they all are acting out being molecules. Yes, then they run around. We work with Ivy Tech, and we offer a semester-long program through Ivy Tech. We partner with IU, and we work with about 4 classes here at IU. We do community events. We do fusing parties. We do a Day of the Dead event. We do Lotus Fest. If you've ever been to Lotus, you will see us there. We do the Great Glass Pumpkin Patch. And we do our holiday, we do our spring cultural event. Last year, it was Viva el Vidrio, celebrating the arts of Mexico. This year, we're going to be celebrating Islamic art, particularly medieval Islamic art, on Saturday, April 27th. We're also going to have a special exhibit at the IU Art Museum in conjunction with that. So, yeah, there you go. I'm going to end it because I know I'm out of time. But open it up to questions. Yeah.
There you go. As a fellow religious studies degree holder, I was interested in what brought you terrifyingly close to a higher power. Tell the elephant stepping on story.
I will say that the elephant stepping on story is not the times I have come closest to a higher power. I was we were in a petting zoo in Madrid that had all sorts of animals, including, I believe, that cow. And it had a baby elephant on a chain. At one point, my mother had briefly left my 3-year-old sister in charge of me. And as it happens in that moment when I believe my mother was running to the bathroom, my 3-year-old sister was in charge of me. She was not very good at that. The baby elephant broke loose from its handlers and went rampaging across the zoo. And according to the stories, stepped over me. And just kept walking. And I was completely oblivious, eating sand. No clue. I've had other times where I've been a lot closer to death than that. But that was certainly the closest I've been to death involving an elephant. Yeah.
Could you tell us an important lesson that you've learned from glass blowing?
So for me, glass blowing is trusting the other people who you're working with. For me, that's a big part of glass blowing. I find with all people that if you say, I am going to trust you with something that is very dangerous, but I'm trusting you with it. So here is a metal pipe and the end of it is 2,000 degrees. Almost everybody steps up. And even if you're doing it with little kids, the few times we've had people get hurt, we did a program at University Elementary School, 96 people, all the 6th graders in the school, only one person cut themselves, and it was the principal who did not listen to directions. So for me, a big thing about glass blowing is trust. One of the other things that I find wonderful about glass blowing is that it is completely engaging. You have molten glass that is 2,000 degrees at the end of a pipe. If you stop turning it, it will fall on the ground. If you don't pay attention to it, you can hurt somebody with it. If you let it get too cold, it will explode, not just crack, but violently explode, sending shards of glass everywhere. So you have to be fully present in what you are doing while you're making it, and it engages your entire body. I liken it a lot to those of you who remember learning how to drive a stick shift, where you have to be doing one thing with one hand, one with the other, something with one foot, something with another. You have to be actively paying attention to what you're doing right now and actively paying attention to what you're about to do so you don't rear end the car in front of you, right? Glass blowing is like that. You have to be fully present when you're doing that. And I think that's what makes it so fun. And I think that's one of the things that makes it engaging for people who are looking to get out of their regular world. When you come to glass blowing, that's all you're doing. You're part of that community and you're just doing that.
Online, Tim Jessen.
Hello.
Hello.
I was hoping to come there in person and I would have talked to you before or after, but I remember interviewing you for a column I wrote on pilgrimage done by your family in Spain. Do you still do that kind of thing, or tell us more about that since you're such an eclectic, interesting person?
Thank you yes, I am an eclectic person. What he's talking about is my father, David Gitlitz, who some of you might have known many years ago. He was a professor at IU for a little while. He was a scholar of pilgrimage studies, particularly the pilgrimage across northern Spain, the Camino de Santiago. And I was lucky enough to spend one summer walking the Camino de Santiago, 600 kilometers, with him and a group of students. It was a college class for 9 college credits. So we would walk 14 miles and then have class. And the class was on things like architecture. Today we will talk about Gothic architecture. We will talk about this church's Gothic architecture, and we would read literature. I don't do that sort of thing anymore. I still love traveling in groups. I'm actually going to be doing a group tour to Uzbekistan in a few weeks as shameless research for my Islamic art event at the Glass Center on April 27th. Put it in your calendars. I've always been interested in how people think and what people believe. I will say one of the things about the Glass Center, like with Rotary, we are non-denominational and apolitical. So we welcome everybody in. It is a safe space for everybody. And I think my experience on the Pilgrimage Trail and through religious studies has also brought me to that. I will say the single best thing I have done in life for opening a not-for-profit glass blowing studio was being a restaurant manager for 5 years, because I can pay attention to the front of the house, the back end of the house, the irate customer, the guy who's chopping things in a weird way back there, and the dishwasher who speaks no English all at the same time. And I can manage a large group of people doing some chaotic things. I'm not sure I could have opened the Glass Center if I had not been a restaurant manager, oddly enough.
Thank you very much.
Speaking of which, that was great. Other questions?
Anyone else?
Lynn?
Hold on. That I love what you do, and I've watched you do it since pretty early on, and kind of hope to think that the Art Commission and I helped shepherd you toward where your organization is now, which I take full advantage of. I love it.
And I would like to give a shout out to the organizations here in Bloomington that support the arts. The Bloomington Arts Commission, and then now Maya Michelson at the head of the Indiana Arts Commission have been huge supporters. And during COVID, Lord love y'all, you threw money at the arts. And that made such a difference for us being able to keep afloat. Bloomington is a great place to make art. It's a pretty crappy place to sell art, but it's a great place to make art and to learn how to make art. Yeah, Charlotte.
Have you considered going on stage as a comic? A glass
Awfully
comic.
sweet. I want to keep things engaged. Amy and I were talking about teaching on Zoom where everything is just a black box and you have no reaction from the people. So
what kind of insurance do you need? And what kind of a building do you have to make this all safe?
Well, I think we should really turn that to Lance, who is in fact my insurance agent. So we have a variety of kinds of insurance. We are a not-for-profit, and not-for-profits are inherently different than for-profit businesses. Main differences: we don't have an owner, we have a board. You have to have a board. You have to have a mission. The things you do have to follow the mission. This will relate to insurance in just a second. You can get big grants. Thank you, Indiana Arts Commission and the Bloomington Arts Commission. And there was another one I've forgotten. Anyway, so the types of insurance we have building insurance, which came through when we accidentally set our roof on fire. Not our fault, not our fault. We have insurance that covers all of the students and all of the volunteers. So we are working with inherently dangerous things. Every single thing we have in our building can hurt you pretty impressively. If people are really excited, I can show you all my scars from glass, right? So we also have everybody signing waivers beforehand saying they know they're working with inherently dangerous things. So if we accidentally kill them, it is not our fault. Also, the waiver says we can take pictures. It's kind of a weird combo. But there you go. So we have the waivers. We have insurance for all the people who are involved. We also have board of director insurance because since we don't have owners, if you're in a nonprofit, if someone decides to sue you, the people who get sued are the board of directors. If you serve on a board of a nonprofit and do not know this, it's a good thing to know and make sure your organization does have insurance for the board. There was the insurance, and what was the other part of that? What kind of a building? In Bloomington, Glass blowing is rated is zoned as heavy industry. So you have to have a building that is rated for heavy industry in order to do it. We had some stipulations when we were looking. We wanted to be on a major thoroughfare. We wanted to be walking distance from my house. We wanted to have space for a gallery, space for classrooms, space for a glass studio. Ideally, we wanted to be on the B line. We wanted to have lots of parking, and we wanted to have a garage door. And I found the place that had all of those things, and it was zoned heavy industry. So we have a 4,000 square foot building. We're in the floodplain, but we're raised up 3 feet, so we don't get wet. The other buildings in our complex do. We have poured concrete floors. You really do want concrete floors or something non-flammable when you are working with molten glass. I have been to glass studios that have wooden floors, but they don't teach beginners, right? Because beginners dribble. And glass molten glass ends up on the floor and it'll pop the concrete. But other than that, we have tall ceilings. So we have 16-foot ceilings. That's not a requirement. That just makes life easier because there is some stuff we do in which we throw glass over our head. You should come to one of our events, particularly our one for Islamic art, which will be happening Saturday, April 27th, and you'll be able to see what that looks like. Shameless plugs here. And then our classroom space, concrete floors, again, because glass gets everywhere. And then our gallery is carpeted and lovely and looks fancy. So we were lucky that we found a place that had everything we wanted and is 0.8 of a mile from my house. So I can walk to it. Yeah, but you don't have to have anything special except a really wide gas line going into your building and an electrical panel like you would not believe. And ventilation. Lots of ventilation. Yeah.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you so much.
I'm going to be
Absolutely
up here.
fantastic.
If anybody has other questions, I also have flyers if anybody would like to take one. We offer classes for all ages, starting 5 and up, and all of our classes are online. So if you're interested in making your own thing or bringing some people together to make a thing, or get a group of people and we can throw a class for you, I have information over here.
I love the idea of a Rotary event, somehow
Totally.
related to your activities as well. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Rotary wheels, those would be great. Yeah, yeah. And then thanks for you being here. We're going to give a gift to Big Brothers and Big Sisters.
Oh,
another great organization in town. So thank you so much for being with us. Okay, well, that was fabulous as always. Acknowledgements. Amy, thank you so much for greeting everybody at the door. Mike Baker, thank you for your introductions and your reflection. I believe that Sally is anchoring our Zoom session online. Thank you very much, Sally. No? Oh, no, it's Joy. Joy was able to do it. I'm sorry. I am reminded. Kyla, thank you for being our reporter this month. Tracy, once again, thank you for running around with the camera. And then Tyler, also a seamless meeting. Thank you so much. Thank you. Our next meeting, actually, before we go, I want to quickly, I don't have my, hold on one second. Sorry, guys. Okay, I'll cancel that. I was going to say something about Aaron Burrington, but we will send that information to you online. But let's just rise to do the 4+1 test. Oh no, before we do that, next week, Frangipani Room with Aaron Davis. He's going to be speaking on A Jew in the World, It's Complicated. So that's going to be very interesting. And with that, let's do our 4+1 test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, is it fun? Thank you, everybody. Have a good week.